Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Liz Cantu, currently serving in the Center for Teaching and Learning Faculty Director role. And as part of Estrella Mountain Community College's International Education Week, we're so excited to have Dr. Erica Wager, who's going to talk a little bit about internationalizing the college classroom and a little bit more about her, also not only her role in participating in a faculty fellowship abroad, but also in how to better support our bilingual students. So Dr. Wager, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cantu. So what I would love to start with, I have a QR code up here. Well, first it will ask you what your primary sort of subject is that you teach or that you support students in. So my example is technically, if I were to get specific, I teach biopsychology and statistics, but I'm looking more for the general, like psychology or whatever topic it is that you your main role is in. And then also what brought you to this session today. So that's at the QR code as well. Sort of what are you most hoping to learn or take away from this talk about internationalizing your curriculum and working with bilingual students? You are also free to just unmute and chat, but I wanted to give people both options to either put into the Google form at that QR code or to just unmute, or if you're in person, just chat, whatever people prefer. Just realizing there are multiple sections to the Google form. And I won't be able to see the answers until we've gone through all of them. So in fact, in addition to writing in the Google form, because that will help me later on, also please add to the chat or unmute yourselves and say what brought you to this session today and what you're hoping to learn or take away. Fabulous. I will say for me, oh yeah, go for it, Rachel.
Hi. I am here to learn from my colleague. I'm always looking for new ideas and new ways to globalize my curriculum. So I'm here to steal your ideas today.
Hopefully, and vice versa. So likewise, I want to have a good sharing because there are definitely some folks in this room that that do have more specialization than I do in some of these topics, that's for sure. When I was initially started to become interested in the Mexico Professional Development Program that I participated in this last summer, I was really interested in how to support my students who are bi or multilingual, and how to make sure that they understand that they should think of it as a superpower as opposed to any sort of kind of deficit when they're thinking about it.
Okay, you do have Melanie and a couple people participating in the chat. Do you want me to read those out or can you see those?
I can see them, yeah, thank you. So Melanie, I'm in chemistry and hope to improve my cultural responsiveness. That is fabulous, thank you, Melanie. I have a student using Google Translate in class, so I want to learn more ways to support her. That is such a good, real example of something happening right now, right, in our classrooms. I would wager that a lot of our students are using Google Translate for a lot of assignments and things. So definitely something to think about. And I will have some practical examples, Carrie. But like I said, there are a lot of people in this room that are more expert on some of these topics. So I'd love to hear from them as we go through this as well. You're welcome. Okay. So yeah, okay, good, I can, good. Education, history, teacher ed, math. So this is a good spread. So then it looks like for ideas, discussion on how to internationalize curriculum or support our multilingual students. And then the one that got most, to learn strategies for making my course more culturally inclusive. Love that. And for practical examples to make my class more bi and multilingual student friendly. Okay, fabulous. This is super helpful. Thank you everyone for your responses. So I was able to see some of the responses in the Google form. Okay, so with that in mind, that was generally what I thought most people would have as goals coming in today, but I just wanted to confirm. So thank y'all for answering those questions either in the chat or in the Google form. So you can go to the next slide, Liz. So why it's important to think about internationalization and our bilingual students. So I wanted to give some practical data that is literally hot off the presses. My student Anya just sent this to me about 4 minutes ago. So we have been doing a study. I am part of the STEM URE undergraduate research experience, and I'm mentoring 3 students in a psychology research study. And one of the questions I wanted to ask, somewhat selfishly, because I'm particularly interested in this, was how many students at Estrella are bilingual or speak other languages. So we surveyed so far, and we may actually continue in the spring. So if Anya, Erin, or Daniela ever reached out to you to give this survey in your class, this is your student data. So far we've had 463 students participate, which is a pretty amazing sample size for our college. So from a statistics nerd, you can know that that is a fairly nicely representative sample of our students. Nearly 50% reported being bilingual, and nearly 30% reported that English was not their primary language. So I think, or that they shared, I should say some students reported that they sort of shared, and it was primarily English and Spanish as sort of a combination of primary languages. So that number in particular was larger than I thought, the 30%. So we will continue to look into this, but that was an interesting finding, and like I said, hot off the presses from our data analysis. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So internationalizing curriculum. This is something that was part of the Mexico Faculty Development Program application that I had to talk about when I was applying to this program. And the idea, this is very generalized, but the idea is to somehow try to integrate more global perspectives into your course content, develop intercultural competence in students, but also in ourselves as educators, have more intercultural competence, and emphasizing language and cultural diversity. So this idea of making sure that even if you have a certain cultural background, certain language, primary language, maybe you're monolingual, you speak one language, you are still making it clear to your students that they are free to represent their own backgrounds, their own cultures, their own language in the classroom. Making sure it's not, they should always be encouraged even, not just, tolerant. You don't want to just be tolerant of other cultures or other languages in the classroom. You actually want to encourage that in your students. Next slide. So why it matters, it prepares students for a global workforce, right? They're often not going to leave and then just only work with people in their direct contact. But also it encourages empathy and cross-cultural understanding. So I'm particularly interested in empathy. I studied that for my dissertation. And I also looked at culturally responsive teaching in my dissertation a little bit. So just trying to, again, have this more open perspective and ability to put yourself in your students' shoes, for instance, but also to help your students have more empathy and understanding. So just based on what we've talked about so far, if folks are willing to chat, unmute, or put into the chat, there's some good diversity in disciplines here in the room today. Saw math, chemistry, history, teacher ed, business, psychology. So how do y'all think global perspectives, and this could be anything, right? Something about a different language, something about a different custom from another country or culture, something about having students consider other people's cultures in an assignment. How do you think in your discipline specifically it could help enhance kind of student learning? Could any sort of addition of a global perspective or cultural openness enhance your students' learning in their classroom, do you think? Some like to think before typing things out. They might be doing that. For me, one of the things I wanted to do when I was starting to think about why I wanted to do the Mexico faculty development program was how I can help students, again, think of if they are bilingual, if they have another language as their primary language, not think of that as necessarily a deficit. So not wanting students to think that somehow they're, less ready. Even if they might need more support, like the example of a student using Google Translate in classes, right? It doesn't mean that they're less intelligent or that they're less able to learn those things. So connecting what they're learning to global issues can increase the relevance of the content, totally. So it will make students more interested in content if you're able to connect that content to global issues. And that can mean, so with culturally responsive teaching, sometimes that refers to having students reflect on their own cultures and like how their own cultural backgrounds can be applied in different contexts. But then with global issues and internationalization, there's also this component of having students reflect on other cultures and other international locations and places and languages that exactly can really make the content more relevant and interesting to them, which is so important. Thank you. Pablo.
Hey, Erica, this is Pablo. I can see the connection in regards to, kind of valuing a student's, I don't say global, but, their bilingual background to the content. Chicano studies, that's really easy. The concern that I've always struggled with is, kind of maintaining the academic rigor in some of the readings. And I know these students are struggling to comprehend that material. Now, after we discuss it in class, they might be able to make those connections. But even then, they're kind of shy to talk in class. Even like I know they understand it, I can see it. And when I ask them a question, because they are bilingual, I've noticed that they might not raise their hand until I call on them and kind of bring them out. And that's like the biggest struggle I encounter because, yeah, I know they're capable of doing this. It's just a matter of giving them that confidence to discuss in a kind of open setting because I think they feel very just kind of nervous and they just don't feel like they're up to par to some extent.
For sure. And a lot of our students have had, unfortunately, negative experiences if they ever have used a language other than English in the classroom to chat with a friend. I just saw this viral TikTok video going around, and it's a high school teacher telling two students that they're not allowed to speak in Spanish in her class because she assumes they're saying something bad about her. Right? Like, and they're like, this was during group work, and we were doing our group work. We were just doing it in Spanish because we understand it more that way. So imagine we have a student who's had that experience in high school coming to class, and now we ask them to answer maybe a pretty complex question about whatever our discipline is. And they're thinking, if I even accidentally say one word in Spanish, is my teacher gonna think I'm saying something bad about her, right? Like, of course not, but if they've had those experiences in the past, that lack of confidence can be sort of triggered by when they're asked a question in the present, right? So yeah, that's an excellent point, Pablo. I mean, I don't have all the answers. I tend to think that the more students become comfortable in the classroom, the longer they're there, the more they become comfortable in the classroom, the more they're willing to answer a question and maybe be wrong about it. But my question to the group is, how can you especially foster that in online settings? Because I think in online settings it can be, well, in some ways it can be a little trickier because maybe you're not getting as much of that like connection, but maybe actually in some ways because they can use Google Translate, they can use ways to kind of translate things, there can be a little bit more confidence in some ways. I want to say what Rachel said. So in teacher ed, students are learning about global education systems in order to better understand what other countries are implementing that leads to effective student outcomes. They're asked to seek out ideas, strategies that teachers in the US could potentially borrow to enhance our own education systems here and to discuss what other countries could potentially learn from us. I love that. So very co-learning from international locations, right? That is 100% what I got this summer in my in the Mexico professional development. It was you're learning with University of Guanajuato faculty, and so I got to learn from the linguistics faculty at University of Guanajuato, holding optional Zoom sessions for EMCC students to collaborate with students from other countries. Do this once or twice a month. Sessions are very well attended. Yeah, so that is, I mean, straight up internationalization, like textbook definition, right? You are actually connecting your students with international students and they are learning from each other. Can I ask, Rachel, are those with students from the University of Guanajuato? Or are they other students?
Well, they have been primarily with the Donbass State Pedagogical University in Ukraine. So those are the monthly meetings. My Ukrainian students and my EMCC students do joint lessons for an hour and a half, once or twice a month on Fridays. It is on their own time. It's purely optional, but they do breakout rooms. So the Ukrainian students and the American students are collaborating together on a number of different topics, typically tied to my culture and diversity and education class, but sometimes tied to my introduction to education class as well. And this past week, I invited students from the University of Guanajuato to do a 3-country joint Zoom session. And in the spring, I will be doing my introduction to education and culture and diversity class. We'll be meeting with students from the, I forget what it's called, but from the teacher education program at the University of Guanajuato. So it's kind of a combination, just whoever I can pull in to do that. We just do it. So it can be any.
And are some of your students doing that? Are they online students?
Yeah, it can be online students or in person. I have a combination of both.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's another really good example of an activity you can do that can include online students. Because I think a lot of the activities we do, like on campus and things, we can tell our online students that something's happening, that there's an event or something. But if there isn't a virtual option, a lot of our online students might not be able to make it. So I love that that is a potential way to engage online students and in-person students. That's so cool, Rachel. Thank you. I need to talk to you about that. I want to maybe do something like that with our students too, with some of the psychology students. Okay, you can go on to the next slide, Liz. I mean, I love hearing from other people, so I go slow. So I'll try to get through some of the informational slides more quickly. Oh yeah.
Being someone that oversees our international student population too, I sometimes think that's an area that we don't tap into enough. And you can't assume that you know who is resident or domestic student from an international student, especially when you have, you know, gosh, 30% are multilingual, bilingual students. But I think instructors, if they're aware of who's sitting in their classroom, who's enrolling in that virtual online course, and being able to intentionally try to create groups or dialogue where you can get that learning happening, I think is so crucial, because I'm always sharing that I want to promote study abroad, but not all of our students will be able to study abroad. Rachel has a really great setup with this COIL class where you're doing this online learning, but you've got students in your class that you can also, you know, create that learning from a global perspective. So I plug that because I think sometimes we have that resource right there that we could take advantage of in a much better way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good point. I was just talking to a student. This was actually I know I already talked about my professional growth in Mexico, but I was going to have you introduce yourself to say a little bit that you do the international ed. So would you do that real quick?
So I know some of you, my name is Jen Cito-Madosky, and I serve as the program manager for the Center for Global Engagement at the district office. And my office is the one that sponsors the Mexico Community Development Program that Erica went on this past summer. We are now up over 90 faculty that have participated in this program since 2011. Obviously, we didn't go during the COVID years, but outside of that, we've taken faculty every year. And what Rachel's done, what Erica's doing right now is exactly why we support and have this program, as it's really beneficial and it provides these opportunities. So this is happen.
And this year, there's going to be a student study abroad in Guanajuato with its music and Spanish are the two classes that students will be able to take. And there was a student at the expo just now who was saying, oh, I know I can't do study abroad, I can't afford it. And I was like, well, there are scholarships. There are scholarships for students who might be interested. And I always tell students too, I did a summer study abroad trip to Mexico in college. I spent one day in Guanajuato and fell in love, and that's why when I saw, well, for many reasons, but one of the reasons when I saw that email come out about the professional growth experience, I was like, oh my God, I love Guanajuato, and I would get to live there for 2 weeks, so I always tell students, you don't have to go for a whole semester, you don't have to go super far, you can learn so much in closer areas.
And that's why our programs too are short-term in the summer. We recognize students have families, they have jobs that they can't give up, and just for the affordability factor that we build it in so that these programs are anywhere from 1 week to 4 weeks in length, just depending on what works best for you. And you're right, there are scholarships out there. There's Pell Grants, program recipient, there's a Gilman Scholarship, so we can try to make it work, whatever options.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so in this experience, this professional growth experience, you spend 3 weeks, 1 week in Mexico City and 2 in Guanajuato with a weekend trip to San Miguel de Allende. And it was incredible for so many reasons. You do actually stay with the host family. That's my host family.
This was Rachel's and mine too.
Yeah, so it's Cha-Cha on the right side, and her daughter Lisa, and I learned so much from the faculty at the University of Guanajuato and the students. I actually got to meet a lot of international students, and for my language development, these two were the best. So I had a Spanish teacher. She was amazing, Itza. I learned so much taking that class. But truly, and I mean, so many of us know this, right? Immersion is the best way to learn another language. And so they would speak with me in the most kind and patient ways, talking with me and letting me. So anyway, I highly recommend it for many reasons. And one of the best ones was getting that firsthand learning about different cultural and educational practices and engaging with the faculty, the students, and your host families to learn about their culture. So you can go to the next slide, Liz. So I highly recommend it, and I'm always happy to talk about it with folks.
And we're doing info sessions on Thursday.
Oh yeah, I was gonna add a slide about that. There will be info sessions on Thursday.
9 a.m. and 6 p.m.
9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Thank you.
The email went out today to all faculty.
Huh?
The email went out this morning.
Yes. Yeah, I saw there was an email that went out this morning as a reminder of those. Really one of the things I learned in Mexico was the importance of relationship building and learning communities. So when you can find like-minded faculty and staff, for instance, like most of the people in this talk right now, who want to support students from an international and global lens, that is one of the best things you can do, because now you have this community. Like I was just asking Rachel, I might want to get some of her information about the classes she connects her students with. You have this community that you can share resources with, and you can bounce ideas off, like how we're talking about how to help students get more confident in the classroom. The active learning was huge. And so again, like what Carrie was saying in the comments, when you can have students sort of actively connect information to global issues, to things that they're interested in, to their own cultures, learning happens better, right? And that is one of the things that is a common misunderstanding about culturally responsive teaching, is that anything like that, including internationalizing curriculum, reduces the rigor of the class. But actually, because you're increasing that sort of connection of content to real life, it can increase the rigor. It can help students understand some of that content better. Okay, you can go to the next. So that leaves me to talk about culturally responsive, culturally relevant examples a little bit more. You can go to the next slide. It has a lot. People don't have to read the entire thing. But I like this little image that I credited here. So just some practical things you can do like tomorrow, right? You could start making changes. So people have talked about this a lot, but learning how to pronounce names is incredibly important, right? And that could mean you getting it wrong and then having to correct yourself once or twice. Like there is that embarrassment factor when you get a name wrong, but to just not say the student's name because you're worried about mispronouncing it is worse, right? Value and respect students' native languages, use cognates. So I'm actually gonna have some cognate examples that faculty can use. And I will give these also to English faculty, which I'm not sure if there are any here, but that was one that some English faculty were looking for some practical ways to help their students. We're gonna have some international snacks, y'all. So providing visuals and graphics. opportunities for students to share their stories, either orally or in writing. Let students work in cooperative groups. Even in your materials and your content, just have multicultural people, names, examples. Allow for use of bilingual resources. So you can include in your resources some bilingual ones. And we know for our students, the nearly 50% who are bilingual, most of them are Spanish and English, right? So that is how so you could have Spanish resources, for instance. Ask students to talk about their families, their cultures, their experiences, right? Those are some of the even little things. Like I have my students do a weekly check-in in the online courses where I just have them say one thing they've enjoyed about the content or material that week, or if they didn't enjoy anything, although most of them enjoyed something, but I also give them the option, or something they had a question about or weren't sure about. And this year was the first time I added for 1 point extra credit, you can include a meme or GIF or something related to the content to get 1 point extra credit on that check-in assignment. Students have just posted like the funniest things related to like emotions. Emotions was a recent one we did, and students were posting memes about like how expressing emotions and all that, or the sleep chapter. I love talking about sleep, right? Students posted so many memes and GIFs of like people falling asleep in class or all that. So that's just to say that even just getting them to connect a little bit to something they respond to, like TikToks or memes or GIFs, has been a really fun way to get them a little bit more engaged in the content. They do have to relate it to the content somehow. Okay, the next slide. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, so I think I do a pretty good job of, trying to illustrate cultural differences and the content. Just off the top of my head, I use it in the intelligence chapter line as far as our view on intelligence in our country, Western world, very content related, and that we are almost encouraged to only speak English in the country. And around the world, people speak multiple languages. And I tell you, we're behind the 8 ball here. We're losing out. You go to Europe or somewhere else or around the world, and they're speaking 3 to 4 different languages. But what I'm seeing now in this talk is that I feel like I do it like in a group, well, not necessarily a group setting. Well, we talk about it, but their assignments are only going to me. I guess I could use more discussion groups, but I was hoping people in the room help me elicit more. I have 3 students in one of my classes. I've got one from Africa, one from Western Europe, one from Eastern Europe. I feel like I'm wasting it. I mean, we know where they're from, and we've talked a little bit, but I think I know a lot about it. But I want my other students to know a lot about their culture as well.
Yeah.
So any ideas about this?
Without you don't want to put them on the spot. Exactly. In terms of, you have to share your international experience in the class, right?
You don't want to make them a token.
Right.
Yes. No, but I mean, I am kind of going with like Pablo's question, this idea of making the classroom a safe space for students to feel comfortable talking about their own cultural background, their own language, their, whatever it is, the fact that they're international students and experiences from where they are. I do think that is a big, how you sort of set the tone for the class and help then make students feel more comfortable like sharing their experiences. But you're right, it's hard. You don't want to force them to talk about their experiences, right?
A psychologist.
Yeah. And so that even lends itself in a lot of ways, right? Especially when you're on certain chapters. When you're talking about language, for instance. We have a whole chapter on language. And that was one, I will say, that was one very specific way that I internationalized my curriculum more following this professional growth opportunity. I made an assignment in my biopsychology class where students have to talk about the direct brain benefits of bilingualism. So like how bilingualism is literally a superpower, like how it helps your brain. And so again, just really to remind students that it's an asset, not a deficit, because exactly what Chris was saying, unfortunately, the United States, and particularly where we are in the United States, I would argue is one of the only places in the world where sometimes it's not seen as a positive for someone to speak two languages, right? In most other places in the world, if you are multilingual, it's a huge plus. So just reminding students that it is a huge plus and like how good that is for them can help kind of set that stage for them being more open. But you're right, it's a matter of for students.
There's thing out there.
I know. As people were listening, were they thinking of any potential ideas of like how to get international students more involved in discussions without, like putting them on the spot to talk about their experiences? Because also to what Jen was saying, there's so much students can learn from just meeting other people. They don't have to do study abroads to get a really global perspective on things. Did anyone in the virtual space think of anything while we were chatting? And then there is also the question, what would an internationalized assignment look like in your course? I just gave an example of having students think about bilingualism and talk about the brain benefits. So that would be for my biopsychology class, right? I also added to my intro psychology classes an assessment of different, so for the developmental psychology chapter, I had them find some sort of tradition or custom from another country that aligns with a certain developmental stage. So like a lot of countries handle death and dying in very different ways, right? And there are some really incredible traditions and customs that differ a lot from the United States, where students can then analyze those differences and learn a lot about, and then I have them reflect on their own cultural background and how they kind of have a custom related to this. So you can do it like that. I've had, history, Pablo was saying his lends itself fairly well to internationalizing content. But then with communication, like intercultural or cross-cultural communication, I imagine is a good one. See, with some of the like chemistry, math, I've had people before be like, that one's a little bit, they feel like that might be a little bit trickier to internationalize or use culturally responsive teaching. You can start with things like talking about people in the field who are not, old white men, right? And who have done a lot of work in their field, and maybe they come from a different country, maybe they are a different race or ethnicity, and just highlighting how people can contribute to the field in so many different ways. Oh, maybe having group icebreakers where the question to discuss is based on their international experiences, but it can be tourist or residential. So then you're not like outing the only international students. You're saying, hey, where have you gone? And then get some icebreaker questions for that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And I'll just briefly cover the next slide because it's a lot. But I'm happy to share this with folks if they want. So like I said, most of our bilingual students, which there are nearly from our sample that we just took that almost had 500 students, nearly 50% said that they were bilingual. And most of those students are bilingual in English and Spanish, right? Not all, but many. And so one concept that folks recommend is using or giving, you don't have to use cognates, you don't have to know Spanish to support students that speak Spanish, right? It never hurts, but having cognates available, and telling, reminding students there are a lot of ways, words that have similar meanings. And there was even this idea of having students make their own sort of cognate dictionaries as like a way to quickly reference if they see something that they're not totally sure about. This kind of gets at the idea, Carrie, you were talking about, which is having students use Google Translate in the classroom so that they're understanding things. You can go to the next slide, because that's a lot of information. But again, using those or telling students they can use them, right? They can kind of create their own little cognate glossaries or dictionaries. And reinforcing again that making these connections in their mind is meta-linguistic, meaning it is something really amazing that their brain does. It's not that they're cheating, it's not that they're taking a shortcut. When they do something like that, it is a strength. It is their brain making connections between multiple languages. And that works really well to help them connect concepts in their mind. Taking the next slide. Oh yeah, so what barriers? We've already talked about some barriers, and we did have some folks respond to some of those already, which was super helpful. Language barrier with some students where English is their second language. They're really smart but struggle with reading comprehension, particularly with the very academic articles. That is such a good point. The content sometimes feels like it gets in the way, where the dry, hard science scope puts culture on the back burner of curriculum and assessment planning. Encouraging speaking in class, getting students to identify their cultural background and identify making them feel comfortable expressing personal journeys. These are really good challenges, and let's see if we can think about some ways to, I loved the group icebreakers, right? I think that could actually be a way to address some of those. Getting students more comfortable in class. Again, I think a lot of those kind of practical ideas that were listed in the culturally responsive list can be very helpful, and I can share these slides after this presentation if folks want, because of those sort of practical ideas. But yeah, working with students and making sure they have the resources. So I do want to highlight, we now offer English 107 and English 108 at Estrella for the first time, I believe. And this is an English 101, English 102 class, but for people who English is not their first language. So they're still taking English 101, English 102, that rigor is not removed, but it is specifically to support students who maybe English is not their first language. They need more support in some of those things, exactly like the potential barriers that many of you listed. So if you do notice students struggling, you could always recommend that. We also have our Writing Center tutors, and Rachel Aborn, who runs the Writing Center, is trying to get more tutors some strength, experiential learning in working with students who speak other languages for the Writing Center, right? Because that takes another skill. Sometimes it's difficult to recognize when a student has a language barrier, yes, when it may be a learning disability or another special need, right? Because some people may assume it's a learning disability and it turns out it's a language barrier, or vice versa, right? There could be one or the other. Again, I think giving students the resources, letting students know the different resources available to them can be helpful. If you go to the next slide, Liz, there were a couple that I think were fairly sort of covered some of these. Time and resource constraints, right? The language barriers that people talked about, cultural differences, again, just making students feel comfortable, having them know that they're in a safe space to ask for questions, to ask for support. Institutional support can be tricky. We do now have the English 107 and English 108 classes, which I think will be very helpful, particularly given those percentages I showed y'all at the beginning of the presentation, how many students speak other languages and English is not their primary language that we have. Yeah, and I would say with professional development needs, things like this where people can learn from each other is probably one of the better things folks can do, but there are tons of resources online too. And like I was saying, our writing center has really fabulous tutors, and some are more specialized in helping students who English isn't their first language. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, we've already talked about bilingualism and internationalization and how they're pretty connected. So you can go to the next slide, please. So what kind of strengths do your bilingual students bring to the classroom is another question. And again, I know a lot of you have already answered these, which is fabulous. They can share their own educational experiences, often have a solid foundation in their native language. During discussion, they're able to connect material with personal experiences. Yes, some students pick up on Latin and Greek etymology much faster because of their other languages that they know, right? Just different viewpoints, different ways of thinking, different ways of learning math is a good one. Yeah, most people speak multiple languages, right? Right, we talked about that. So if you go to the next slide, Liz, yeah, so bilingual students have this enhanced cognitive flexibility and creativity, right? So again, it's good to make sure you're understanding and recognizing differences between language barriers and potential learning disabilities. So with someone who has a language barrier, they're still going to be able to demonstrate pretty deep cognitive awareness and ability to task switch, ability to inhibit inappropriate, responses on quizzes and things like that. And so that's where it can be a matter of talking with the student and trying to have an understanding of how they might be facing some barriers. A lot of times they have a deeper cultural awareness and empathy, kind of like what we were talking about, what Chris was talking about, where a lot of other places in the world it's seen as a positive to be multilingual, and therefore you can learn more about other people, other cultures. Ability to view problems from multiple perspectives is also a big one. You can go to the next slide, Liz. That might be my brain slide, which I'll skip through quickly. But if you're interested, I'm happy to share some of the research about the brain benefits of being bilingual. And again, just reminding students that this is a positive, not a negative. Yes, there might be some times where you mix up your words and there might be some times, but that's because your brain is holding double the amount of vocabulary. Of course, you're going to have some times where you mix up your words, but that's because your brain holds more of it. So yeah, so here we go. I love the visual too. Thank you, Sarah. I can can talk you through even more the findings if you want after talking. I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, and it helps with aging, by the way. So talk about that. So you can go to the next slide, Liz. I was actually going to say these are, I'll start to try to wrap it up. So the translanguaging practices can help, things like using the cognates as ways to sort of reflect, and flexible assessments. So maybe with one thing I did starting this year with my students, one of the assignments I have them do is an interview where they have to interview someone in their life about a significant event, a challenge they overcame, a success, something like that. And this is the first time I said, if you want to interview someone in a different language, you can do that. And so I listened to, and it was, and so some students did. So there were students that interviewed in Spanish. I was able to understand a lot of it. I do say so myself. I was really proud of myself there. But I even said, I know, I said in the instructions, I know a fair amount of Spanish, so I can probably understand most of that. But if it's another language, that's okay too. Like, I don't have to understand the language. You can, they have to rate a reflection about the interview anyway. So they can then reflect that way and I can learn that way. So yeah, these kind of more flexible assessments can be really helpful. Encouraging peer learning, these icebreakers, these group activities, right? And again, providing the scaffolding to help with English without using any sort of deficit language. Like, well, this is going to be really hard for you because you have something stopping you from understanding this word because there's another word that tricks you up, or just trying to make sure that students see it as an asset. So hopefully you've been thinking as we've been going, kind of what changes you could maybe make to your classroom to be more inclusive. You can keep going, Liz, because I do want to make sure. So I love the idea of celebrating our bilingual students. So again, helping remind students that being bilingual is their superpower and that it's an asset that students bring to the classroom. This I made this image with AI. Thought it was too cute to not share it. You can keep going. So yeah, hopefully you sort of saw the connection between internationalizing your curriculum and supporting bilingual and multilingual students, and how using students' diverse linguistic perspectives can also enhance global perspectives, and vice versa, learning about, oh yeah, please do. Dr. Davis Ragland. You can use that image. That's why I made it actually, because I want to put it in my slides and I didn't want to have to worry about it. Which I know maybe isn't the best way to use AI. I don't usually do that, I swear. Christy's not here, that's good. So yeah, you're welcome too. Okay, can you keep going, Liz? So I have some action steps you can take, things we've already talked about. You can keep going.
I would say with Seek Out Faculty Development, there is a distribution list for faculty that are interested in international engagement activities, curriculum development. And if you're interested in getting in that, email Erica and then she can forward it to me. We can add you to the DL. But that's a great opportunity. Maricopa, we're going to work on it. We're going to get better at it, have more opportunities for our faculty in the district. But there are opportunities, U of A, ASU, and then, because of the virtual world, places across the nation have opportunities. So I really encourage faculty to take advantage of these free, a lot of them, opportunities that are out there.
100%. And there are so many people on campus. Like I was Rachel, I know.
Rachel Clarissa,
Clarissa, who have a lot of experience here. We have ESL teachers. They might teach the, oh gosh, I forget what they're called, but they're not credit classes. But they're non-credit. Is that is what it's called, non-credit classes. You can tell it's not my expertise. Who have a ton of experience with this, teachers in education. So there's a lot of people available to us already. So you can keep going, Liz. I think that's most of what I had. I had some closing thoughts that you can skip past. We've discussed a lot of that stuff. So yeah, thank you. I think this is, it was scheduled from 3 to 4, but I'm available until 4:30. So if folks wanted to, if there were any questions, if people wanted to discuss any more of the ideas that came up.
I just have your email address either, right?
Manta. Oh, sorry.
I think y'all can figure it out.
Thank you. What on earth? I think it'll
Got 2 days.
change in Liz's as I'm going. We'll see. Liz, you might have to reload it. You're right. Thank you. I thought you were saying because it's so long, and I'm like, no, Jen, we do have a straight mountain, all of it behind our name and our email.
In the district.
I know, the district is a lot too. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone thank you, Liz, for updating. That looks right now, right? And I do highly recommend, so again, there are those informational sessions on Thursday about the Mexico Professional Growth Opportunity. That is incredible. I highly recommend it. It was one of the few times, probably in my life, where I felt like I blinked and it was over. It was so amazing. I was like, I want to stay. So yes, I highly recommend it, and I'm happy to answer people's questions on it. And we have an expert here to answer questions on it too, about the application process or any part of that. So thank you for coming, and I hope it was helpful, and you're welcome to stick around if you have any questions or discussion points. You're welcome. Thanks, y'all.
They couldn't take an IQ test. I'm gonna tell you.
Smart.
That based on this, people score high, will have an advantage, they'll get an extra couple points on the test. This is all fictitious, of course. And then discuss how IQ tests were used to stereotype people in the turn of the century. IQ test with country, and it's language, it's all verbal, and I like that.
Really showing them,
Yeah.
like, exactly,
Showing-
actually demonstrating
Yes.
as opposed to just telling them. This was really hard. This was
Yeah.
prejudicial. Like
Yes.
this was, it's like, no, actually understand. You're going to feel frustrated if I tell you if you don't do well on this. You won't have as much of a benefit.